Welcome to Conlanging, the podcast about constructed languages and the people who create them. I'm George Corley, and with me, where are you at this moment?
I am currently in America, though I was just in Lebanon, actually.
Yeah, so from somewhere in America, we have Human1011.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of people will know you better than they know me. But Human1011 is runs a YouTube channel that mostly does short form content, I think. Etymology and stuff. But the reason I wanted to talk to you is you, like me, had the idea of creating a language for dragons.
Yes.
And why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and also tell me a little bit about how that came about, how you got into conlanging.
Yeah. So as you said, I go by Human1011 online for the past a little bit over 2 years now. I've been making sort of short form style content. It's kind of educational about linguistics in general. And when it comes to conlanging, I'd always been kind of just interested in it, just because the sorts of videos that would just pop up on my recommended on YouTube. You know, in fact, some other people who are very well known in the space, like Bibloradian, Conlang Critic, just random people would pop up. And it was the sort of thing that I had this kind of idea for in passing, but never really wanted to try. And then one day, I came across another person who does short form conlanging content. Short form linguistics content. His handle is Etymology Nerd. And what he ended up doing is he made a few shorts, not very in depth, but he essentially made some like a bird language and a dolphin language. And he tried to like very quickly throw together some ideas for conlangs for animals. And I thought that was really cool, but I kind of wanted to take a step further. And I thought, what would a conlang look like for dragons? So I decided to put a little bit of effort into it. And that first video went super viral. So I decided that there was a lot of idea to explore behind that. So I decided to continue pursuing that.
Yeah. I saw the etymology nerd stuff. The one I saw was the one that he made for gorillas, which I think he calls monkey. And the way that he used egressive and ingressive sounds in order to make it sound like gorilla noises is interesting. You have these shorts about the dragon language. Now that's only a small part of what your channel is. I understand. It's a lot of etymology content, a lot of Arabic content. I understand that you are Lebanese.
Yeah. I'm Lebanese American. So
Lebanese
I try to talk about Arabic
so
a lot.
Lebanese of Lebanese descent. So you have a lot of content about Arabic, but for this dragon language, it's been interesting to me because I created specifically a dragon language like meant to be used in Dungeons and Dragons, and it was interesting to see how you approach things differently than I did. And there's a wide diversity. It's a fictional mythical beast, right? So you're going to have a lot of different takes on what it could be. So it was interesting. So looking at it, like the first thing that strikes you is you have a whole series of sounds that are meant to be accompanied by fire breath, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that was like one of the main ideas when I was thinking like what would be a kind of cool thing that dragons would do when speaking. And I thought, like at least in my headcanon, I was imagining stereotypical fire-breathing dragons. And I thought, like in the same way that we have a voice box, which is very finely tuned for different production of vocal sounds, I'm sure they have whatever the biological equivalent would be for some sort of magical like firebox. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to think that they would use that in encoding their sounds. So I decided to implement that if a bunch of the consonants and vowels require flame breath of some sort.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you decided to like notate them as pharyngeals and say humans can produce these as pharyngeals. But then when in your shorts you've got a butane lighter and actually, you just light it.
I literally have I got it right here. Well, I have a lighter here, and I light this. It's like, oh, just imagine that I'm a dragon breathing fire. Yeah. My idea was that, of course, if this was an indigenously dragon language, they would have this sort of fire breath. But if, for whatever reason, maybe this is a D&D campaign and you're doing some sort of incantation, or maybe this is just a society where dragons and humans are just interacting a bunch. If a human needs to speak, they're going to approximate it to the best of their ability, and you're probably not going to carry a lighter on you. Yeah. So the lighter is more of a kind of a visual flair for the shorts, I think. But yeah, I thought about I feel like pharyngeals are a decent approximation for humans.
Yeah, something just something that's not already in the language that you could throw in. And that also lets you write it in IPA, which you otherwise would have to invent a special symbol for.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. And then the reason that I didn't go with that, but some people actually suggested that. For one, I was wanting people to use it in game, and I didn't really think about having a replacement for that. And another thing was I was explicitly talking about dragons in Dungeons and Dragons, and they have a lot of breath weapons. Their breath weapons have a recharge, and it just didn't fit for what I was imagining. But then you also actually have ways that you can you can imagine the dragons have some other use other breath weapon type things or other organs to produce a sound that humans can't. That's interesting to me. It's phonology. I love phonology stuff, and one of my own first languages were for creatures that had a syrinx, and some birds. So a syrinx is something that birds have, and some birds can much more easily produce two different pitches than a human can, and I was using that. But yeah, but usually nowadays much more conventional than you are. But that's a cool idea. I want to talk about though. Let's get further into nuts and bolts here. When I am looking at your thing, so let's put it on the screen. Okay, here, there's the inventory, and then the gender system is part of it, but throughout here you have a huge focus on animacy, and particularly animacy from a dragon's point of view, right? Because dragons and other particularly powerful beings are at the top. Humans are a level lower, and it's thrown in throughout the whole language, not just in the noun class system, but also in word order and case marking and everything. What was the impetus for that?
Yeah, so I think I first learned about this sort of animacy hierarchy thing through Navajo. I think it's one of those kind of linguistic fun facts that people hear a lot if you're kind of into linguistics, that you hear that Navajo has a sort of animacy hierarchy. But what's really cool is that at the top of their animacy hierarchy, it's reserved for just humans, as well as lightning. When I first heard that, the idea being that lightning, at least in their culture, is seen as very highly animate. And this idea of animacy doesn't necessarily need to be a literal animacy thing. It can be about cultural values. And the moment I heard about that, I thought like, wow, there's so much room to explore in a conlang with that, because you can learn so much about what the speakers of the language think depending on where they class it in the Animacy hierarchy. So for the dragon language, I thought like, oh, for sure the dragons are going to view themselves as above humans. So whatever class,
Yeah.
there's going to be some class that's going to have dragons and other, I'd call it the exalted class. And then you have like the rational class for like humans, elves, dwarves, etc. And so it was really fun trying to explore that space of, okay, like if you're a dragon, who else are you putting as exalted? Who's in the rational class? Are people below rational? Like where do different species and different objects as well line up on the hierarchy?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I had the idea that dragons would like look down on humans and humanoids, but like I didn't build out a whole system for it. I just have like one word, like a sort of an insulting term for humans or humanoids is Ifedu, is little giant, because like they respect giants, they don't really respect like humans. But you've just built this into like organizing everybody from a dragon's point of view. I do notice that you have like separate classes for magical and mundane. Is that like a hint that this is like used for TTRPGs or something, or
Yeah, so I haven't like explicitly used it for this, and that wasn't really like when I was making this, I wasn't explicitly trying to think of how I would use it for a TTRPG, but I have played D&D before in the past, and as I was like thinking of, okay, what are some other distinctions, I thought, one, it'd be kind of useful to have this sort of distinction, but two, also, like, I think it just also makes sense in a universe. If a universe has dragons, of course, there's going to be magic and stuff. And I think it makes sense to have like a very separate class of here's magical objects and here's the complete non-magical stuff. And it is, again, in part of that hierarchy where magical stuff is seen as higher and mundane stuff is not seen as important.
Yeah, that is interesting. To separate that out. It's sort of like it's something I could go either way on with a language, depending on how like magic is viewed, whether it's viewed as a separate thing or as just like a thing that exists in the world. It's very cool, and those were the main things that stuck out to me as like interesting like themes that were arising out of this language. And like how much like world building has gone behind this. You do have like a specific idea about these are fire breathing dragons, but like beyond that I'm not sure. Like, and you have ideas about how they relate to other beings, right? But I don't know, like, is there a particular, you just have like a placeholder name for the world? Do you have other ideas about the world building, ideas about the world, or ideas about other creatures that exist in it?
So yeah, I've had a lot of ideas very much centered on like the dragon culture and how like the dragons view things, that sort of thing. And I haven't done as much world building on like the broader world and like anything like that. Like I haven't really made a world. Part of that was because as I was making the videos, a lot of people seemed interested in it, and I wanted to kind of like not go too much into the world, so that in theory, if someone wanted to use the language, they can kind of drop it into their world. But also, like to me, that's also quite an undertaking. And so to me, I was kind of focusing on like, okay, what is like the dragon culture and how are they viewing their interactions with like other humans or other species, other societies. And I haven't gone into any like explicit history or terrain or world building like that. But there has been like a lot of consideration, mostly on just like on the culture and like what values dragons have and how they view others, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? We know that they view themselves as above humans, right? What else can you talk about, like how your dragons view themselves or the world, and how that's reflected in the language then?
Yeah, so it really, I feel like a lot of it does come back down to the Animacy hierarchy, whereas they kind of view this world in a very strict hierarchical way, where there's the non-magical material stuff like rocks, and then like as you keep building with Animacy, you kind of build on value. So like magical stuff is more valuable than mundane stuff, and they view some sort of magic and energy. They see that as potent, and they see life as like the next step up, right? So if like what a rock is to a magic wand is to say some animal like a dog or something, right? That's just like the next step up. And so there isn't really there is still a distinction between like living and non-living, but all of this is like kind of the next step. The next step on the hierarchy is monstrous creatures. So they view something like a vampire or I don't know, any other monstrous creature like a werewolf also as being like above kind of unintelligent animals like sheep and dogs. And then again, the next level is like intelligent humans. And so they view themselves as some sort of like imbued with magic, much more powerful, longer living, that sort of thing. They view that as kind of like the top of the hierarchy. And so to them, I'm not sure, I don't think it's like a religious belief, but maybe it's just more like a philosophical belief of there is this sort of hierarchy of magic or like sentience or sapience or energy that kind of goes with the whole world. And the more you have, the more valuable you are.
Yeah. And this does really track with comparing it to human languages in a way, because when you have some kind of an animacy hierarchy in human languages, my understanding is humans, or at least like adult humans, tend to be placed at the top. And like even if like the system like talks about even if the system like includes like spirits or gods or things, often like gods would be even like at human level or like below in the animacy hierarchy, which is, if you are an English speaker, you're not familiar with this type of thing, and you're thinking of it in a fantasy context, you would not expect that. But then like the real world comes in and says, no, humans generally just put themselves at the top. And so, of course, dragons would also put themselves at the top of the animacy hierarchy. And the fact that they don't have humans along with them, that they put humans on a lower rung, says something about how they view themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you bring up it is a good point that like in human languages, very often the humans will put themselves, even if they do believe in gods and spirits. And the fact that the dragons in this world are doing the same thing, and obviously it's kind of even more crazy because obviously in a fantasy setting, this is a world in which gods and spirits are things that are living among them, right? Like gods come down to the planet and they interact with people. And so it's not just like this ephemeral idea of a god that comes through religion, but also they walk and interact with people. And even then, they're still being put on the same level because the dragons are putting themselves, they see themselves as very highly. And so they'll still equate themselves with even other very powerful beings, even beings that would be, in theory, more powerful than a dragon that they would lose to, like a god, for example.
Yeah. But I think the reason like both of us have had this thought, I think it just kind of shows that that's like a classic view of like modern like fantasy Western dragons, is that they are, some would say arrogant, some would say they're just like confident in their abilities and understand their place in like the power scale of the universe kind of thing. But it is very interesting, particularly if you're talking about like intelligent dragons that are extremely powerful, that this is like the archetype that you generally see in like modern fantasy fiction, is that they view humans as, something under them and not worthy of notice and things like that. I don't know if it's that extreme for you, but you are seeing them like put a rung below, not exactly equivalent to animals or anything.
Yeah, and that's definitely, it's an interesting thought as well. And also you mentioned that it is a sort of like very much a stereotype of like an archetype of like Western media as well. And I've gotten comments from people in like thinking like, okay, does this work for like other cultures? And personally, I'm not as familiar with the attributes of dragons in other cultures, but it is very true that my depiction of dragons in this language is very much a product of my upbringing and what I'm used to in the stereotypical idea of a dragon.
Yeah.
But there's no objective truth in what a dragon has to look like or how they interact with their world.
That would be a good question. Actually, like I don't know a whole lot besides stuff that I've picked up from like studying Chinese, and like, but Chinese dragons can be depicted as a greater being, but I think it's less in Western fiction. You see them more like you see more evil dragons first, and you see also dragons that are like their confidence in their power like goes into like arrogance. I'm not sure if that would be as common in like depictions of like the Long. I think it's more seen as like a source of wisdom, and maybe that would affect how that would work. But like, yeah, I don't know. I also like I'm not going to be like super confident about that because it's not something I'm like deeply into like the stories and stuff about. But it is interesting to like be talking about this different perspective. Are there like words in the language that like also exemplify like different like the point of view of dragons in interesting ways?
Oh yeah. Trying to think off the top of my head. There's definitely some words here. I'll have to also be scouring the dictionary as we're chatting here. There's definitely words when it comes to like what they relate to humans, and like for example, like a word that might be like related to a human might serve as like an insult when attributed to dragons or something like that, where they're doing a very clear job of delineating the different categories of the different creatures, where the exalteds and the rationals are very much different categories that they're viewing. And so that kind of thing definitely comes up. Although I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, unfortunately.
I'm just looking at your dictionary. I don't necessarily see I don't necessarily see anything like that. I do see interesting like some wild polysemies going on.
Yeah,
like,
that's also some of my favorite things to do is like to start with some very old start from very old proto word, and then just like think of how are the many different ways that this could diverge
I
to
see.
get you
Okay.
very different meanings.
Okay, like feltu, a historically common Draconic name. So this is like an opaque name for monstrous, a succubus or an incubus. A farm animal. These are all in different classes, so they'll get the different class suffixes, so that'll distinguish. Uncontrollable laughter, that's in the magic class. Cheese, and then cheeriness, gaiety, luck, good fortune.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did do this with the historical method.
Yes,
it sounds
so
like.
So
what was the root? What was the proto root? What did that mean?
So the proto root, it had to do with, I think it had to do something with dairy products, and I think if I'm remembering properly, I would probably have to double check, but it was a loan from human. Like I didn't make a full fleshed out like humanoid language in universe, but I came up with like a bunch of sample like root words to come up with. And so it had to do with like dairy products or something. And that came from a human language because dairy products are much more important for humans, but they don't really care for a dragon. So a dragon would have to get that from a loan, right? Like because dragons aren't really doing dairy since they're not mammals, right? So it's not a big deal. So that's where farm animal and cheese come from because it's a root. But in the human culture as well, like because dairy was such an important thing, it also had to do with good luck and fortune. So that's where the idea of good luck and fortune comes from, which is where the idea of like happiness comes from, which is like why you get gaiety and cheeriness.
Yeah.
Because that is related to laughter. And the very last thing to get to incubus and succubus is the idea of actually the same thing that happened with kind of the English word gay, which went from meaning happy to meaning like lascivious. It kind of went through that same sort of pejoration where the idea of being happy means you're like kind of sexually, lascivious, which is what the idea of succubus is. Actually, the same thing happened. I think the word right above it is the adjective. Yeah, the adjective fautu also had that same sort of thing happen where it means cheery and lucky, but it also means lascivious in there.
Okay, that's super interesting. I did not expand it out in all these ways, but I did have the same idea of loaning a word for like milk from I had them loan it from Sylvan from the fairies, like the older form of their language, because dragons don't consume milk.
Right.
So
they wouldn't have a word for that. There's no need.
That's definitely something that you would want to bring about. I do want to actually. So I do actually want to come back and talk about the phonology, because there was one thing that hit me when I was looking at it, is like comparing it to like the decisions that I made, beyond having the pyrrhic sounds, which is a cool idea. It seems like you have an idea of like doing additive things more than like subtracting, because like you have lots of rounded vowels here, whereas I thought, well, I mean, they wouldn't have flexible lips, so maybe they wouldn't be able to round vowels. Was there a thought process to that? Because I see you don't have bilabial plosives or anything except the only labels you have is M and the bilabial fricative p. So what was your reasoning different on like what their abilities would be there?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think actually in the proto language there were no rounded vowels for that exact reason. I was thinking that like the lips wouldn't really make sense. Like any articulation you would do with the lips would probably only be something like a nasal or maybe just like a th sound that you would just like blow out. I think I ended up deciding to add rounded vowels. I think my idea was that like rounding probably isn't going to correspond the same way that in English we can do like a very protruded W. So like the way dragons produce rounded vowels is not going to be the same way because they physically can't. But my thought process was that you could still maybe like have an equivalent of some sort of biological mechanism that has a similar-ish effect. In the same way that, humans can't produce fire, but they can do pharyngalization, which is like the closest thing they can do. My thought was that like dragons are doing some sort of thing with their lips. They're probably not rounding to the same degree, but like they're maybe just constricting it. And that was my thought process there. But you're right that it was intentional that there's no B, there's no P, there's no W. Because I thought that those are much harder sounds for dragons to produce.
That's super interesting, because you came to the opposite conclusion to me. Like for me, and this was also like a vote in the stream chat too, but like I laid out my argument and people basically agreed with me. But like I thought, okay, bilabial sounds, including bilabial plosives, are cool because I actually had just read an article about Tyrannosaurus Rex, and there were some people who were putting out the idea that they probably did have lips that could seal their mouth shut so you wouldn't actually see their teeth all the time, like you do in movies.
Wow.
And I was thinking, well, most animals can do that, can like seal their mouth shut. So something like definitely like a nasal, like if they can do nasals at all, they would do something like that. And then, well, I mean, I can get that plosives might be difficult because you have to build up pressure, and how strong are their lips to build up pressure. But my thought was like, I didn't think about having an equivalent process that would produce a similar like formants. I was just thinking about, well, their lips are not flexible enough to do this like humans can do,
Right.
because they have no need for that, right? That's a specific adaptation for mammals in order to drink milk as babies. That's not a thing that reptiles are going to have. But you came to the opposite idea of like, okay, they'll have something that's similar to rounding, right? Something that has a similar effect on the formants, right? But they can't really build up pressure behind, is what I'm getting from you. It's interesting that again, it's a fictional creature, and neither one of us are really biologists, so it kind of makes sense that like just trying to reason through it on our own, we ended up in opposite places.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. I think my approach is a little bit hand wavy, where it's like, oh, I'm sure there's some sort of mechanism they can do that'll approximate it. I'm sure, right? And some biologist is like, no, there's no way.
Well, I have a friend who is really into Logan Kersley is really into like alien languages, and to him, he would say like just the idea that they are producing sounds that are reasonably equivalent to sounds that humans can make is kind of hand wavy, because their vocal tract, just because they have an elongated snout and they have a longer neck and all kinds of physiological differences, some of which like you don't even know, that like they would just sound completely different. But there's a certain place for artistic license where we got to say, okay, well, I want to speak it with my mouth, right? Right.
Yeah.
So
like you have to do something. Right?
Yeah. Like, you want to use it in your shorts and give examples, without having to use like a synthesizer or something. I want to write spell incantations that other people can read while they're playing a TTRPG, so while they're playing D&D or whatever. So yeah, we have to make it pronounceable by humans for these particular projects. So we do have to hand wave a little bit. It's just interesting that we came up with different limitations going from completely opposite directions. We should talk to Biblaridian and ask him if he could. I don't know if he Biblaridian knows a lot about biology, but I don't know how much specifically he knows about like sound modeling. But
he's working on. I think he's working. Didn't he say he was going to work on like alien conlangs for his like alien biospheres project?
I believe that the neotectons will have languages eventually, but he may need to like consult with other people on that. What is this? So this is something I was reading about. So different classes of nouns have different case marking, and I'm a little like not clear on like what is this directive and recessive.
Yeah. So directive and recessive. Well, these are not real linguistic terms. I made them up for this language. I mean, maybe there's some language out there that has them. I doubt it. But because of the way the Animacy hierarchy works, it's very strict in the word order that words in a sentence have to come in order of most animate to least animate.
Yeah.
So dragons must come before humans in sentences. Humans have to come before objects in sentences, etc. And of course, that can be really confusing because, if I have a sentence like the human loves the dog, I have to say human loves dog. But then if I want to say the dog loves the human, I also have to put human first. So the directive and recessive is case marking to mark it's to clarify kind of when something's being moved around because of the animacy hierarchy. So the directive is a sort of default where all nouns by default are assumed to be in the directive case. And then the recessive is when you mark something in the recessive to mark that it is being syntactically moved in order to satisfy the animacy hierarchy, which is kind of confusing. I hope that kind of made sense.
Oh, okay. Okay, so in your example, like for the second example, dog would be put in the recessive case.
Yeah. So if I wanted to say the dog loves the human, I would say the human, human would be in recessive. Wait. Yes, human would be in recessive. So if I want to say the dog loves the human, I have to say the human recessive loves the dog. And the recessive indicates that, hey, I know I'm starting with the human, which is in like subject position, but it's not actually the subject. I'm only putting it here to satisfy the animacy hierarchy.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's clever. I don't know if there's a language out there that does that. I believe so. You said you were inspired by Navajo. I think Navajo does have this where word order follows animacy. Though I don't.
I think I haven't looked at Navajo in a minute, but because Navajo was like my starting inspiration for this idea, and they have the same thing where the word order has to follow the hierarchy, and I think they do it by marking on the verb whether or not we're following hierarchy or not. So a sentence like the human loves the dog, on the verb love, I have a particle to say yes, it's the correct order, human loves dog, or there's a different particle to say actually it's the reverse order, the dog loves the human.
And it's surprising how thorough you are in following this hierarchy, which I don't know if this is actually like the same as like what I don't know if like Navajo even goes as far as what you've done, because I think like even when you have embedded clauses, you have to still rearrange the sentence in ways to keep the hierarchy working.
Yeah, I think it's more extreme than Navajo is. I think Navajo is clause specific, but this is like it spans over like the entire sentence. And so if you have to, you might front like an entire subordinate clause at the beginning just to satisfy the hierarchy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's cool, but it all is also crazy. And it makes
translation hard.
It must be a giant pain to translate anything in this language or compose anything in this language for you.
For sure. And I can't imagine if this was a real language, like how tough it would be for like a learner, like a human trying to learn Draconic. I mean, like to think that you'd have to kind of rethink the way you think of word order to always begin your sentences by talking about the highest animate things. It's almost like a topic marker in a sense, where it's like you're talking about the thing that you most want to refer to, the exalteds and the rationals, and you always end with the least important things, the mundanes and the abstract nouns.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think of, and I think you have a line in here in your sort of draft grammar that you shared with me, where you're like, oh, dragons are smart enough to track all of these things in ways that humans might not be able to. Which is an interesting way around it. It is interesting to like imagine, for a more extreme example, something like, I think it's called Fifth, where the language is structured with a stack, like a stack like programming languages can have, where it's like it's last in first out order and things. I don't understand how it works, but I know it's very alien to how human language works. You'll find some really extreme ideas in the Conlanging world out there, but like just the fact that you've taken something that does exist in real languages, but taking it to an extreme is really interesting. Yeah, I think those are like major things. Are there? We came to the same idea of doing base 8 number system.
Yeah, that's funny that we converged on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw it because I was looking at pictures of dragons, and it seemed like they had four claws on their forelimbs, but I don't know where you came up with the same idea. But
Yeah, it was the same idea. 4 claws on each
really,
limb.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it works. That's yeah. If you count the digits on the hands, it's a good starting point. That's why the vast majority of human languages are base 10 or base 20. Although there are other like odder bases that are worth noting. Yeah. This, but yeah, it's interesting. I do say, like, the way you present it in shorts is interesting to me. I've tried to do a little bit of my own short form content. I'm not good at like the loud, fast talking influencer voice like you and etymology nerd do. I have to do a different style, but it is interesting. Like, I see one of your shorts pop up, and I open it up, and it says, "I made a dragon language."
Yeah, it's a totally different environment. It's I don't know, it's like it's a different medium almost. And because the short form kind of demands people's attention, if you want to kind of get anywhere, you have to have some big hook. You have to speak in a certain way where you grab people's attention and you say, like, I made a dragon language and here's this new thing I added and whatever, which doesn't always lend itself the best to, like, if I want to have a nuanced discussion about the intricacies of a language. So it's a little bit limiting in that way.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, how I was going to ask about that. Does the short form content like affect how you develop the language and how you present it in particular ways?
Yeah, I think for presentation, definitely, because when I'm presenting them in shorts, I'm thinking of, like, what in the first 5 seconds can I say that's gonna, like, get someone's attention. So I think I started one of my shorts by saying that, like, I added 2,000 pronouns to my dragon language, and so, like, you listen to it, like, what, you added 2,000 pronouns? And it's a little bit misleading because, like, 2,000 pronouns, just because there's 7 genders, there's 3 grammatical numbers, there's 2 grammatical cases, and there's 3 persons. So you just do the multiplication and it comes out to, like, 2,000 or something. So it's like, oh, okay, like, it's not like there's 2,000 like individual different words. It's just like 2,000 different inflections for the pronouns. But, like, I'm presenting it in this way just to grab someone's attention right at the beginning. But I think also it has influenced the development a little bit because at least now it's a lot more fleshed out. But when I was first kind of thinking of how I want to develop new features, in the back of my head, this kind of nagging idea of, like, okay, I need to make sure it's something presentable, which is, like, good and bad in certain ways. Like, it's good in the sense that, like, kind of provokes creative thought and different ways of thinking about it, but it's also a little bit limiting. And I'm sure there's other ideas I probably could have come up with that maybe wouldn't have been good for the camera that would have been really interested in a conlang. So I don't know. I think there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah, I think there are certain things you can share. The thing that I landed on was sharing, like, individual words and how I came up with them and what they mean and all of that. It's not something where you can go into great detail about what your grammar is. And I can see how that kind of thing can be, like, can be limiting in how you're presenting it. Like, I'm looking at here. I'm looking at your dictionary right now, and we talked about the example with, like, the cheese and all of the other things, but I see a lot of words where you take a advantage of the class system to make a whole bunch of words out of one root, which I think is very interesting. But, like, if you were going to turn that into a short, it would be like you could do, like, one word, one root, and talk about it, but you couldn't, like, go on to give lots of examples and lots of explanation of the system and stuff.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing about shorts is that like the medium, it's really good for anecdotes and like little stories and little snippets, but you really do not have the ability to do any depth whatsoever. And that's why actually I'm working. It's still in the works, but I want to make like a big long form video where I kind of go over a lot more of the intricacies of Draconic. I don't make that many long form videos, but I think it'd be warranted, and that way you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you can have the shorts for the kind of flashy like pop examples. Oh, here's a fun thing, but then also I can funnel people into the longer video if they're really curious. They can sit down and get like a much deeper, more proper understanding of the language.
Yeah. That I think that would be a good idea, and I would definitely watch it if you made that longer feature. Just your grammar document and stuff is super interesting to me. And I as we're like getting on through the thing, I do want to ask, like, how has your language background influenced the way that you constructed this language? Like, for example, you are an Arabic speaker. That probably is why you included pharyngeals as like the alternate to the Pyrrhic, right? Because you're familiar with that. But like, are there other ways in which your own background influenced this language?
Yeah, for sure. Arabic had a lot of, Arabic had a lot of very different impacts in a lot of different places. So the default word order is VSO, and that's true of Arabic, or at least of classical Arabic. In Arabic, you have subject prefixes on verbs and object suffixes, and the same thing happens in Draconic. Like you said, the pharyngeals, that's kind of a big one. It kind of goes towards like the sound of the language that like has lots of like very heavy, breathy sounds, and that is often very stereotyped of Arabic, but also just because I very much like the pharyngeal fricative, the ha, and pharyngalization in general. So that was a huge thing. I'm trying to think. I think that, and in other places too, the dual number, that's a thing in classical Arabic. Mm-hmm. There's a word for the definite article and there's no word for the indefinite article. That's a thing in Arabic. So it's a lot of like very minor things where I kind of liked how Arabic did it, and I wanted to add it into it.
I mean, we all have our different like inspirations as conlangers. Like, I know Chinese pretty well, so every language that I do has some things that are inspired by Chinese in some way. Usually just lexical, because I've only once created like a language that is like syntactically or morphologically like Chinese, because it's such a specific type that that like is not, it's not like super popular in among conlangers. We like our charts. We like our morphology charts.
Yeah.
And a Chinese style language would not have that. But you know, we all draw from languages we know, and then languages we've read about. Like, you have a lot of Navajo inspiration in this. I'm sure there's lots of other like bits and bobs from other languages that you've incorporated as well. How have you related to like the conlanging community? You say you like started this by, it was recommended to you in your feed by some people who are on YouTube, but have you like how have you like broken into, have you interacted much with like conlanging communities on Discord, on Blue Sky, on Facebook that have already existed on the internet?
It wasn't. I wasn't doing that at all at first, I think, and I think a lot of that is that it's kind of an intimidating place to start. Not that like people are like mean or intimidating, not in that sense, but just in the sense that there's so much to conlanging, and there's like so many people who've been in the space for a while and who know so much about it. And when you're new to it, you kind of feel like you don't know anything, and so it's kind of hard to get your foot in the door. But since then, I've been like getting like on Reddit and on Discord mainly. Those are like kind of the two places I've been kind of going in, whether that be asking for advice in developing my conlang or just helping other people out, or giving other people advice and kind of learning more from other people. Yeah, and I think it's really cool. People have been super kind, and the conlang community seems really cool. It can just be a little bit scary when you feel like you don't know anything and everyone around you knows so much and has been around for a while.
I do have to say, like, I do know, like, part of the answer because I invited you to be in the YouTube Conlang Relay, which is interesting. I'm gonna be trying to get this episode out early in September, so that has not come out yet. Unless this episode gets like seriously delayed. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, for a long time, I asked that because for a long time the conlang community has been this thing that just like this like identifiable community has been doing on the internet, right? Like since the 90s, there were particular spaces that people went for conlanging stuff. And I have seen more recently, since I've been doing YouTube and then like observing, like people have been coming into it from the world building space, like Madeline James, from like general linguistics space, like you and etymology nerd, and it's encouraging to me, and I'd like to hear like how you are encountering the community, and it sounds good to me that you're having a mostly positive experience. I want people to have like a positive experience, and you know, mostly the conlanging community is like a nice place and a welcoming place for all kinds of people, especially if you're doing art langs like you're doing, which is, you know, for artistic purposes. If you get into auxlangs, the auxiliary languages, a lot of the people who are into like Esperanto or Tokipono or something are nice people, but there are some people who have a little bit of the Highlander mentality on that. But mostly the conlanging community is a nice place. I'm glad to hear from like somebody coming from the outside that it's been good.
Yeah, it's been a great experience. I'm super happy, and now that I'm not done. I don't think you'd ever be done with the conlang. But like I'm in a place with Draconic where it's like kind of wrapping up. I'm pretty happy with it, and now I'm super excited to whatever my next project's going to be. And now that I feel a lot more established, at least with my conlang, I'm sure it'll be like more fun. It'll be a lot easier, a lot more to learn. So I'm super excited.
Is it going to be in the same world, or is it going to be in something different? What are you thinking about for that?
It's funny because I have two ideas and they're totally diametrically opposed. One is to have something in the same world, and I was thinking of I really wanted to explore the idea of like a hive mind based conlang, and I don't know what that would look like at all. I'd have to think about it some more. But like I can't even imagine what that would look like. But like what would a hive mind use for language? What would that look like? I think that'd be a really cool creative exercise just to explore that. And that would probably be in the same world. I'm not sure what species it would be, but come up with some fantasy species that stereotypically uses a hive mind, some sort of insectoid. And I think that would be really cool. So that's one of the ideas. The other idea, completely opposite, is I want to do a speculative future English to think about what English might look like in like 1,000 years. I know it's a thing that's been done before, but I want to take my own stab at it. And I don't know, I think that would also be fun. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, it's two completely different ideas.
Yeah.
Future English is interesting. And so the hive mind, I have to ask, like, would it be individuals within the hive using the language, or would it be the hive itself as the intelligent entity using the language to speak with other hives?
I thought of it primarily as a within hive mind sort of thing, which is a little bit weird because I think the idea of a hive mind in general is just like you kind of just beam information.
Yeah.
But I think I would want to explore a way in which I don't think it would be that situated. Like, I don't think the hive mind communicating with other members is your traditional sort of like talking and speaking with someone, but just like how is information encoded in that way? And maybe it's not verbalized, but there's still some sort of information encoding. But in addition, I would also want to explore how other hive minds would interact, or how does a hive mind communicate with non-hive mind creatures? Is that the same thing? Maybe it's a different language entirely, like it's a diglossic situation where they have they kind of code switch between the two.
It's an interesting question because so with a hive mind, if there, I think the question is like, is this the primary way they're sharing information, or are there other ways they're sharing information? And what does that say for all of the things in language that touch on what the speaker and what knowledge the speaker and the interlocutors share? Stuff like definiteness and like topic and focus marking and all of those kinds of things that are about presenting information. How is that affected by the idea that you are not just two individuals speaking, but part of this larger gestalt organism?
Yeah, it's really weird to think about, because there is the sort of stuff like you're saying that you just kind of take for granted that we have these certain categories, and then when you think of it, like if you are part of the same organism, like those walls just kind of dissolve, right? Like, is there a distinction between person marking, like first person versus second person?
Yeah,
I don't know. Like that might just disappear entirely. Is there? I'm not sure. Like the ideas of like, also what sort of information do you even need to communicate? You know, like if you have the same, like you're saying, if you have access to the same factual information, it's possible that you're not conveying any sorts of statements of fact, and that the language is strictly performative in the sense that you use it to issue commands or to do that sort of thing, because you're all sharing the same information. So I don't know, like I'd have to explore it more. Yeah. And maybe I don't know if it would work. Maybe I have to have like a looser hive mind, because maybe a strict hive mind wouldn't even need a language at all. But maybe it's I don't know, something to explore. I think there is a lot of creative potential, and I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what it would look like.
I think it would be like useful to. It would be useful to like look at like the different depictions of hive minds, and like think about how their hive mind stuff works. Like, my brain goes to the Borg, right? And they are in constant like subspace contact with each other, right? Which is going over some kind of like encoding system, but that's computer stuff. I think they can see images from each other and stuff, but they do have like specific commands, right? There's the first time that they defeat the Borg, they send the sleep command to the Borg cube and they all go to sleep, right? So I could see like there being some sort of a language like thing that is used for things like that like you wouldn't necessarily be able to convey by sharing each other's senses or something like that, but that still need to be like sent to everybody as like a command thing. So that does make sense, but I don't know.
I think it'd be very different. I think it'd be more like a programming language than it would be a human language.
But. Yeah, I think it would be a project where you have to do a lot of the world building first to say, okay, this is the information they share through other means, where they have telepathy, they have pheromones, they have things, other ways of sharing information, and then like this is what this particular like language system does and like go from there. But it would be, I would be interested in hearing about that. And I know other people who would be super interested in hive mind language.
Yeah, I mean, maybe someone's done it before. I've not heard of it before, and I think it's a very definitely a wide creative space to play with. It'd be cool to explore.
Yeah. Well, it's been great talking to you, and thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Do you want to do plugs?
Sure. You guys can follow me on Human1011. Search it at Human1011, or you just search it up on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Yeah, that's about it.
And yeah, as I said, more people probably follow you than follow me anyway. But and any like final thoughts before we go?
I think my final thing, actually, if I could say one thing, is that to maybe your general audience who maybe aren't as familiar with the short form content, I think that people in the conlanging space should be aware of the fact that there's kind of this, it's a very wide area of short form that I think is being slept on a little bit. And I'm not sure exactly what that looks like because, you know, short form conlanging, like we were talking about earlier, it's kind of hard to do short form conlanging content. Because you can't go in depth at all, and I think a lot of conlanging is about going in depth. But I think short form is a space that can be used to get more eyes on stuff, and then bring people over onto long form. And so I think people should look into that. And
it's definitely something where we have to think about what works, and I think studying what you and etymology nerd have done with your videos can be helpful with that. I really like me and I think David and Jesse Peterson got this idea from me. Did a bunch of shorts for Lexember. So that you upload them every day and you have one word and that works. But like the little tidbits that you share are super useful. I think we just need to figure out what works.
And it's hard to do that with shorts.
Yeah, and probably going to be different for everybody who does it, but like I think it's a cool idea. I think it's a cool thing to be like trying. But anyway, thank you so much, Human1011, for coming on and talking to me about your okay. I have not tried to pronounce this yet.
Oh, I want to hear you give it a spin.
Okay. What is the caret again? Is that
it's a long Pyrrhic vowel.
Okay. So it's itræχnâħyq.
The Y is the schwa, actually. But otherwise, that's good. Yeah.
Sorry. When I see Y, I think you. Okay.
That's fair.
itræχnâħyq. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure. Okay. Yeah. That should have been. Well. Okay. But and you will see him in the Conlang Relay this year as one leg. And with that, I'm going to say thank you for watching and happy conlanging. Thank you for listening to Conlangery. You can find archives and show notes at conlangery.com. And if you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to go to our Patreon at patreon.com/conlangery. With just $1, you can get access to exclusive polls for my Tongues and Runes series, and also for $5, you can get every podcast episode early and ad-free. And now to thank our patrons: Ndăkaga, Kenan Kigunda, Connor Stewart Rowe, Leslie R. Wagoner III, Jesse, Kay, Alex Russell Hayes, Viren Patrick, Sylvia Sotomayor, Tabby, Nye, Alexis Hugelman, Grammar Antifa, Greka Grunk, Sigourney Hunter, Eloivar Yana Mentuleum, Nicholas Norblad, Jake Penny, Artifexian, Miles Ronkovich, Daniel Quigley, Paul Roser, Our Table, and Tinguish. Conlangery's theme music is by Null Device. Conlangery is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 international license.